Morning sunlight spilled gently through the glass windows of a small cafe in Hongdae, painting golden streaks across the floor. The cafe buzzed softly, the low hum of conversation, the clinking of cups, and the hiss of steamed milk. Kim Hygiene, the owner, moved behind the counter with practiced calm, greeting regulars with a warm smile and a polite bow. Then the doorbell chimed. A young man stepped in, cane tapping lightly against the tiles. His name was Lee Sung-woo, neatly dressed, quiet, and blind since childhood. He moved carefully, tracing his way toward an empty seat near the window. Two men at a nearby table glanced at each other and laughed under their breath. One whispered something cruel, loud enough to sting. The other smirked, nudging his friend before standing up and blocking Sung-woo's path. The room fell still. "Watch where you're going," one of them sneered, pretending to trip as he pushed past. The cane clattered to the floor, echoing like a thunderclap in the sudden silence. Sung-woo froze, his hands trembling slightly. No one moved. No one spoke. The air thickened with unease. From behind the counter, Hygiene's eyes widened. The sound of the falling cane hit her harder than any shout could. Every gaze turned toward her, the only person who could decide what happened next. The hiss of the coffee machine stopped. Even the air felt heavy. And in that single, breathless moment, the world seemed to wait for her response. For a heartbeat, Hygiene couldn't move. Her hands stayed frozen around the coffee pot, steam curling between her fingers like the breath of her own hesitation. The two men laughed quietly, looking around as if waiting for approval. But all they met were lowered eyes and silence. Inside her, a war began between fear and conscience. She knew how things like this went in Seoul cafes. People preferred not to interfere. It was safer to pretend nothing happened. But as she watched Sung-woo crouch to feel for his fallen cane, something inside her twisted. A memory surfaced, her late husband's voice. Calm and steady. "Hygiene, silence can hurt more than words." She blinked hard, setting the pot down with a soft clink. Her staff looked at her, uncertain. One barista whispered, "Should we call someone?" She didn't answer. She took off her apron slowly, folded it neatly, and placed it on the counter. Each movement felt deliberate, like the steady rhythm of a drum before a storm. The bullies noticed her approaching and smirked. "What? You going to serve him special tea at Jumma?" One said mockingly. Hygiene stopped beside their table, her gaze cold and unwavering. "Yes," she said quietly. "But first, I'll serve you something you've forgotten." The cafe went completely still. Even the clock on the wall seemed to stop ticking. She looked down at Sung-woo, still reaching blindly for his cane, and something in her expression shifted, a mix of grief, strength, and fire. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling but clear. "Kindness," she said. "That's what this cafe serves first." The words hung in the air, simple, but heavy enough to make everyone in the room hold their breath. Without warning, Hygiene bent down, picked up the fallen cane, and gently placed it into Sung-woo's hands. Her voice softened. "You dropped this, sir. Please, sit anywhere you like. Your coffee is on the house today." Her calmness cut sharper than any shout. The bullies blinked, confused, as if her composure had robbed them of power. But when one of them scoffed and muttered, "Why defend him? He's just," she turned, eyes blazing. "Enough." The word cracked through the cafe like lightning. Every cup, every spoon froze midair. She took a step closer to the men. "Do you think strength is about seeing who's weaker?" Her voice shook with controlled fury. "My husband lost his sight before he died. People like you made him believe he was less than others. I'll never let anyone feel that way here." For the first time, the bullies looked uneasy. One tried to laugh it off, but no sound came. The other shifted his weight, unable to meet her eyes. Hygiene didn't shout again. Instead, she walked toward the counter, grabbed 2 takeaway cups, and filled them both. Steam rose between them like a wall. She set the cups on their table and said, "Take these and go. And remember the taste. That's shame steeped in kindness. It stays longer than coffee." No one breathed as the men hesitated, then grabbed the cups without another word. The doorbell chimed faintly as they left, their heads bowed low. Hygiene turned back to Sung-woo. Her tone softened instantly. "Are you hurt?" He smiled faintly, shaking his head. "I'm fine. But, thank you." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "No, thank you for reminding us that sight means nothing without heart." A quiet murmur rippled through the cafe. Chairs shifted. Someone began to clap softly. Then another. Soon the room filled with the sound of applause, not loud, but full of warmth, as if everyone was trying to pour their guilt and gratitude into each beat. And in that small Seoul cafe, something invisible changed. A line had been drawn, and humanity had taken its side. The cafe remained silent long after the door closed behind the bullies. Only the faint melody of an old Korean ballad played from the radio, wrapping the room in a gentle calm. Hygiene exhaled, her hands trembling slightly as the weight of what she'd done finally settled in. She moved toward Sung-woo, who sat quietly, his fingers resting on the smooth cane as if it were an anchor. "Let me get you something warm," she said softly. Moments later, she placed a cup of honey citron tea before him, the steam swirling between them like forgiveness. Customers who had stayed frozen moments ago now began to shift awkwardly. One woman whispered, "I should have said something." Another man nodded, his face lowered in shame. Their silence had been a choice, and now it felt heavy. A young student, Ji, sitting near the corner, wiped her eyes and picked up her phone. She had recorded everything without even realizing it. Her hands had been shaking. But now, as she watched Hygiene bow slightly to Sung-woo, something in her told her the world needed to see this. When Sung-woo stood to leave, Hygiene insisted on walking him to the door. Outside, the street buzzed with afternoon life, unaware of the quiet storm that had just passed inside. She watched him disappear into the crowd, guided by the rhythmic tap of his cane. Back inside, GAE uploaded the clip with a simple caption. "This is what courage looks like. No hashtags, no filters, just raw truth." And before the evening sun dipped below the Seoul skyline, the video had already begun to spread. By nightfall, GAE's video had caught fire. Within hours, it spread across Seoul like a whisper of hope. On every social platform, people shared the same 43-second clip: a blind man's fallen cane, a cruel laugh, and a cafe owner's unflinching kindness. Comments flooded in faster than she could read. "We need more people like her. This Ajuma is braver than all of us." I cried watching this. News outlets replayed the footage, anchors describing it as a moment that restored faith in humanity. The next morning, Dalbit Cafe was no longer just a quiet corner shop. A small crowd gathered outside, some bringing flowers, others simply wanting to thank Hygiene. A delivery man brought a basket of yellow roses. No name, just a note that read, "For the woman who made Seoul proud." Hygiene stood by the counter, overwhelmed. She hadn't done it for attention. In truth, the sudden fame made her uneasy. But when Sung-woo returned later that day, holding an envelope, she understood why it mattered. He smiled shyly as he handed it to her. Inside was a handwritten letter, his words written in careful raised ink. "I have walked through many doors, but yours was the first where I felt seen. You didn't just protect me, you taught everyone what real sight means." Tears filled her eyes as she folded the letter gently. Around them, customers clapped again, this time with smiles instead of guilt. The cafe that once served coffee had begun serving courage, and Seoul was drinking deeply in the days that followed. The story of Dalbit Cafe spread far beyond Seoul. Strangers arrived from Busan, Incheon, even Jeju Island, just to meet the woman whose kindness had stirred a nation. The cafe, once half empty on weekday mornings, now overflowed with quiet laughter and soft conversations about empathy and courage. But what moved people most wasn't the viral fame. It was the way Hygiene chose to use it. She didn't raise prices, didn't chase publicity. Instead, she printed a small sign near the counter that read, "Every cup you buy helps someone see kindness." A portion of every sale went to a local center for the visually impaired. Her staff followed her lead, treating every customer like an old friend. They learned to greet the blind by sound, not sight. They memorized the steps to guide someone safely to a chair. The cafe had become more than a place to drink coffee. It had turned into a community, a heartbeat in the middle of a rushing city. Even the bullies returned one quiet afternoon. Heads bowed, they offered a written apology. Hygiene read it, then smiled faintly. "You learned," she said, "and that's all that matters." She poured them tea, the same honey citron blend she'd made for Sung-woo that day. When the men left, Ji whispered, "Uni, you forgave them?" Hygiene looked out the window, where sunlight danced on the streets of Hongdae. If I can't forgive, she said softly, then all this means nothing. And with that, the cafe became more than a story. It became a symbol. A reminder that kindness, when shown once, can ripple through an entire city and never fade. Weeks later, the buzz began to fade, but Dalbit Café remained full, not of noise, but of warmth. Sunlight streamed through the glass windows, catching the steam that curled above the cups like morning prayers. Lee Sung-woo visited again, tapping his cane softly as he entered. The bell chimed, and every head turned with quiet respect. Hygiene smiled, stepping forward to greet him. "Welcome back, Mr. Lee," she said gently. "Your seat is waiting." He laughed softly. "Seems your cafe has changed the world a little." She poured his tea, the same blend as before, and replied, "Maybe just enough to remind people what love looks like when it's brave." They sat together for a moment, sharing silence that said everything words could not. Outside, people walked by, glancing in, some smiling, some stopping to take a photo of the cafe that had become a symbol of hope. Hygiene looked around her shop, the flowers left by strangers, the messages pinned to the wall, the soft hum of peace. And with tears glistening in her eyes, she whispered, "This cafe isn't mine anymore. It belongs to everyone who chooses kindness." If this story touched your heart, share it, because one act of courage can start a wave of change. Like the video, subscribe for more real stories of hope, and tell us below, what would you have done in that cafe? Your story might inspire someone's courage tomorrow.